welcome to the show.
Hiya.
Welcome back.
Got a few tech topics this week. Obviously, China's CEO basically barricading himself inside. Got some NVIDIA news in relation to acquiring the said ARM. Got Intel stock price plummets as they announce delays on their 7nm process. And then looking at potentially outsourcing manufacturing to, at this stage it'll probably be TSMC that'll cup the brunt of the supply. We've got Ryzen 4000 in mini PC, and of course banning of TikTok in the US and potentially other regions. When we get started, we'll go straight into the first tech topic.
Nailed it.
So, ARM's fired China JV CEO refuses to leave. Company rep basically barricades himself in the premises. Now, this news comes out of
China.
ZDNet is actually the publication that we've got up.
What? How has he barricaded himself in?
So he's got basically got an army of minions that are according to this security officers that are basically set up to stop people from entering the premises.
Yep.
And escorting them out. It's actually quite a funny story, this, because it looks like that the part of the acquisition from NVIDIA is that they have to deal with it. It's now going to be their problem. So they're basically passed it off onto NVIDIA if they do acquire ARM, which is in our next story.
Their AI robots on.
Which is interesting. It's going to be an interesting situation. We'll flick over to the browser there now. Basically was acquired by SoftBank, and of course the Chinese ARM headquarters.
The Chinese arm of ARM.
Yeah, basically was let go. Decided he didn't want to leave, and then of course barricaded himself in the premises. It's a bit of a
Lord.
interesting story.
Where's the defense call?
I can't do this.
This is obviously going to be a situation where it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out with the acquisition coming from reports that NVIDIA is looking at buying them out. But yeah, as far as it goes, basically conflicts of interest between the Chinese CEO and of course the investment fund SoftBank. As a result of that, they've had a bit of a dispute. The CEO has refused to leave and barricaded himself inside.
Mm-hmm. I wonder what he thinks he's going to accomplish.
Well, I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's one of those situations where it depends on whether or not he looks at going down the path of trying to keep his job. Obviously, with the acquisition from NVIDIA, it might have been a situation where that might have been part of the stipulation of the buyout, that he was to be let go. That could be some sort of power struggle situation there. That's not uncommon with companies being bought out by other companies. When they sign over the deal, it's a situation where you have to basically restructure the business and remove certain people or do certain things as part of the actual sale of the business. So that's potentially what I could see being the case here. They've said that this CEO needs to be basically axed out of the business before we take it over, and that could potentially be the reasoning for the timing of the whole situation.
Yeah. Or maybe he was sneaking information to NVIDIA about the company.
Yeah, I mean, that's potentially the other issue. It could be a situation where there's been insider information being leaked or IP, intellectual property being stolen, especially with the Chinese whole semiconductor independent by 2025 initiative that they've got.
Yeah.
That's potentially the issue there, where that ARM technology has been sort of leaked to the Chinese, obviously, government, and as a result of that, that's why the CEO was axed. Obviously, that's just speculation. We can't prove that from here, but potentially one of the reasons why that has been such a big hoo-ha about the whole situation. And originally, ARM was a UK semiconductor business until it was brought out by SoftBank.
Where's SoftBank based?
Japan.
SoftBank is Japan. It's basically a conglomerate of multiple companies. So SoftBank actually owns quite a lot of sort of startup tech companies. What was it? The one where you rent office space. I forget what it was called. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Office and breakfast.
No, it's probably on the tip of my. It's on the tip of my tongue. I'm going rogue here, guys. It's on the tip of my tongue. While I look this up, you can have a bit more of a chat about the whole situation.
What is SoftMat part of SoftBank? Like those stores in Japan? Like the big tech stores? No,
I don't think it's... it was a huge thing.
Yeah, this guy's hacking. Straight up.
Has to be.
Yep.
No two ways about it.
Nope.
WeWork, that's the one. WeWork is actually a SoftBank-owned company. And of course, that was a bit of an acquisition that was probably not the best of acquisitions. But yeah, it was a startup tech company. Well, they consider themselves a tech company. But basically the way that they worked was that they would buy an office space or lease an office space and then break it all into smaller little cubicles. And if you wanted to essentially start your own business, instead of having to actually go down the path of owning a whole premises and paying rent for a whole, office space, you could just sublet basically a bit of office space to do your sort of initial startup. And I mean, it had some sort of push, but then of course, as a result, the biggest thing of the financial situations that have obviously plagued the economy, not just obviously in the US but globally, has sort of led to it being a less than desirable acquisition, and the profitability of the company has sort of been in question. But they own a lot of those sort of tech companies. Is owned by SoftBank, and they just basically buy out small startups basically on the premise that hopefully they'll get big enough that they can obviously recoup their costs. But I mean, before the whole WeWork was supposed to go public, they went into their financials and the company hadn't produced a profit since it opened. They're hemorrhaging money like there was no tomorrow. So it's one of those situations where they've sort of lost a lot of money in that whole, SoftBank pretty much lost a shit ton of money in that whole WeWork situation. And of course, I think that as a result, they're trying to sort of get a leaner, meaner balance sheet leading into the next, obviously, article. Obviously, then selling off one of their better assets, which is obviously ARM.
So why are they selling ARM if it's doing so well?
It's not necessarily that they want to sell it. I think it's a situation more that they have to sort of bring their, because you got to remember that they've got a lot of debt on their balance sheet because of the fact that they invested so heavily into, the likes of WeWork, and of course that didn't pan out. So basically how it works is that they just basically bundle all these companies into one, and of course you buy stock options into all these conglomerates. That's where most pension funds and stuff like that would go to try and obviously invest in to obviously boost your retirement nest egg, so to speak. But it's interesting, to spin off this company. But I mean, the only thing I can think of is that they're looking at a situation where they're expecting more difficult times ahead in terms of financials, and that this is a way to sort of square up their balance sheet before that sort of hits, and they're desperate because I mean that's the last thing a company wants to do is to get into a situation where they're desperate to sell off something, because then they'll obviously have to sell it at whatever they can get for it, rather than if they sell it now strategically it's worth something. The company is obviously able to sell it while it's still got a viable profit margin in there. Whether or not they sell it for a profit or at a loss, I'm not sure, but that's potentially the situation that I can sort of see. And I mean, it makes a definitely a decent move for NVIDIA to purchase, because I mean, you look at it from their perspective with Samsung partnering with Radeon Technologies Group to integrate graphics into their own custom SoC. Having NVIDIA GPUs pretty much in a off-the-shelf ARM design would make a lot of sense. I mean, I don't think they would be still leveraging their older GPU architecture, the Mali architecture from ARM. It doesn't make a lot of financial sense from them, because, like I said, they could potentially leverage their own GPU acceleration. That'll obviously bring them probably more in line with the likes of other rivals in the mobile SoC space.
Do you reckon they'll have like a NVIDIA like mobile GPU for like phones?
I think they would probably license it, yeah.
Yeah.
I honestly think they would license it. Whether or not they actually go down the path of doing that or not, I don't know. And they keep the NVIDIA GPU side of things to their own custom designs, or if they license it out. But I mean, you think about it, with everything moving to having to have leveraging, you know, AI and, you know, deep learning type custom silicon components. I mean, even your smartphone now has got an AI engine built into it to help with obviously processing of things like the filters and stuff on photos. So even your basic smartphone now has some sort of level of AI enhancement. Whether it's good or not, it's another story.
Yeah.
But to me, that makes a lot of sense, especially considering like you've got Intel, which has stagnated for quite a long time, and this is a way that I think that, because NVIDIA's unable to probably get an x86 license easily. I mean, the only way that they can get it is by acquiring a company that's already got one. And that is technically possible. I mean, VIA Technologies owns an x86 license. Not that you hear about them at all ever. But I mean, I don't know if VIA would be a
viable option.
yeah. No pun intended. But yeah, I mean, that would be the only other option. And I mean, then they've got to try and compete with Intel, and that's always going to be a grey area, because Intel and NVIDIA don't get on for the most part after the whole chipset licensing lawsuit situation from many moons ago.
Well,
sorry.
Basically, with the whole 1156 and the 1366 LGA sockets that were brought out, that era of chipset was supposed to be essentially brought out within the same time frame as NVIDIA's license contract to build chipsets for Intel. They were building chipsets for the whole Core 2 Duo, Core 2 Quad era. But when the license was supposed to expire, was actually a year after those chipsets made it to market. And of course, Intel said they weren't included as part of the original contract. The obviously lawsuit then ensued. So yeah, quite an interesting acquisition, and a very strategic one, I think, from NVIDIA, especially with everything moving to, like, I mean, smart devices, Internet of Things type concepts. Those things are all ARM based, and like I said, a lot of that's powering essentially the next generation of AI. Like, I mean, it's one of those situations where you look at it from their perspective, they want to push AI to the next level, and to do that they need a CPU as well as a GPU to do that. And of course, by leveraging ARM as a CPU power house that they could sort of bank on, and then integrating their own GPU architecture into it, they could start producing some pretty interesting custom silicon for the Internet of Things, deep learning, and of course AI, especially as we move more further into automation. that's going to be probably, I think, at the first instance we're going to start seeing it. All the new, obviously automation that's in cars is all done on essentially GPUs and CPUs. And of course, you can't really have high power draw CPUs having there because, most of these cars are obviously also moving more and more to electric. The more efficient that you can run those sorts of things is the better. It'll be an interesting maneuver, that's for sure. We'll probably hear more about this whole situation probably not too far away once they start leaking more information and making official announcements.
Mm-hmm.
You look at it now, Mellanox, which was also acquired by NVIDIA, that was a pretty big acquisition for them back in the day as well. That basically gave them the ability to...
How? How did that happen?
Oh, that's more like a punch.
We got technical issues.
No. Well, technical issues.
Rage
Billy's
quit.
brain.
Yeah, my brain. Oh.
Yeah, Mellanox was purchased last year, 6.9 billion, which is basically only a back end to connect, obviously, nodes together in a data center.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a pretty big acquisition from them. And again, like I said, networking all these computers together to basically create one, huge AI crunching monster is basically what they're looking at.
What's the thing from Terminator?
Skynet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I watch movies.
I don't think that we're going to ever get to the likes of Skynet to that sort of level.
Oh, I think that the technological singularity is not that far off.
I
I reckon we'll see it by the end of the century.
It's one of those situations where I think we need a lot more processing power before that'll ever happen.
Yeah, bro. 2 nanometer. 3 nanometer.
It would be sub-nanometer measurements.
No.
But yeah.
Nah.
Well, the thing is that you got to remember that the human brain sort of doesn't think
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Mine doesn't know.
with a single thought at
No.
once.
Yeah,
Your
it
brain
does.
can actually do a lot more processing power simultaneously.
Yeah, it's a bit like
You'd be
floating
looking at more
point.
quantum computing sort of situations before I could see AI becoming anything like that it needs to be. Because the thing is that you remember that...
Liquid nitrogen overclocked brain.
Yeah, you'd be dead. But
No.
that's funny.
You wouldn't. Fake news.
Liquid nitrogen overclocking your brain.
Yeah, it's not been done yet. How would you know?
Yeah. Liquid nitrogen and your brain doesn't really go together.
Well, maybe if you got so smart your temperatures needed to be reduced.
Yeah. Just inject a load of dopamine into your brain so it heats up.
Yeah, don't do that, please. It's not
Liquid
really.
nitrogen overclock. Let's go.
Isn't that just what speed is? Just an overclock.
Yeah, talking overclock. Well, it doesn't look like Intel's going to have much of a way of a overclock anytime soon with their delays on now 7 nanometer processing technology.
You can overclock your RAM and void your warranty. Sounds like a good deal.
Yeah, overclock your memory.
But make sure you buy a Z board.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, that's the thing. Technically, even actually enabling XMP on a non-Z board and a non-K-SKU chip would still technically overclock it because you're running the memory out of JADEC specifications. So as soon as you tighten timings, it's still technically an overclock.
What?
Well, JADEC spec, so 2666,
Yeah.
is CL19. If you run it tighter than CL19 timings, it's technically out of JADEC spec. It's still technically an overclock.
That's insane that it's 19.
Yeah,
What?
yeah. But a lot of people don't realise that JADEC spec is what is technically considered out of the box. Anything actually tighter than those timings is actually technically still considered an overclock.
So how can they sell memory with better timings than that?
They can sell memory with better timings all the time, but it doesn't mean that you're actually going to ever actually be able to run them at those timings. It's up to the board to implement that.
If you can, but it voids your warranty.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's no different to selling essentially an unlocked multiplier CPU. Technically, Intel sell it, but as soon as you overclock, it technically voids the warranty as well.
No, don't Can you stop?
But yeah, as for Intel, stock price dropped. I think it's probably one of the biggest one-day falls that they've had in a long time. I think it goes back almost like 10 years plus to have one of the biggest one-day falls that they've had. But yeah, as far as it goes, basically the
Redemption, yeah.
What was it because of?
so they announced that their 7nm process was actually being delayed, and that basically came on the back of their earning report that they had, basically telling all the essentially board how they were faring up for the financial side of things.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually now sparked also a lawsuit.
From who, like the investors.
Mainly because of the fact that, the investors basically said that, well, you've basically lied to us because you kept telling us that 7nm process technology was on track for the last, 2 years.
Yeah,
we've got good things happening with 7nm. It's looking good. And then, of course, now it comes crunch time that they're expecting 7nm to be out within, a year or two. And it's, it looks like that our 7nm process has got some fundamental issues. I think the biggest thing is just that their ambition on trying to push the technology has obviously sort of backfired. I think that, as much as you go, AMD glued CPUs together, well, I mean, they might have done, but it works. You know what I mean? And it's not like Intel hasn't done it before. Intel technically had multi-die CPUs back on the 1156 socket. And I showed Billy earlier this week the images of the actual dies. They had a memory controller and GPU in one die, and then the CPU cores technically in the secondary die. It's not like they haven't done that before, and they theoretically could do that again. And that would obviously allow them to, move further forward in terms of technology and process.
This is me. No.
But it's going to be interesting. Obviously, moving also some of their production out to TSMC. From what I've been reading and rumored to, this is actually coming off Bloomberg's site here. But there was also rumors as well that it's going to be a situation where they've reshaken up their departments as well.
Well, they better not be taking any of that away from like AMD and.
They probably won't. That capacity has already been purchased, and that's the reason why, if you look at it, Nvidia had to go with Samsung, because they were betting on Samsung basically, because they were a cheaper option, going with them and basically making out to obviously TSMC that they were going to go with the cheaper option, seeing if TSMC was going to budge on price and lower their price to obviously keep the contract. That didn't happen, and that's why with the RTX 3000 series cards, it looks like the whole stack will be on Samsung's 8nm process node, which is going to be an interesting concept because that apparently looks like a slightly worse power draw and power efficiency than what they were anticipating. So that may mean that with obviously AMD's Navi 2X GPUs coming out on TSMC's 7 Plus, I believe, or 7N node, which is more mature than their normal base 7nm node, that could mean that we're actually going to get some better efficiency out of the AMD cards this generation.
Well, they gave us 50% last time. Hopefully give it to us again.
Did you see the leaks again? Now are saying that they don't reckon it's going to be anywhere near as fast as the 3080 Ti.
Look, it's one of those situations where there's going to be conflicting stories coming out of the companies because it depends on where the actual rumor is coming from too.
True.
And like I said, it's one of those situations where most of these companies probably don't want to go down the path of giving the sort of competition the ammunition that they need to have up front. It's going to be one of those situations where they're going to probably want to go down the path of not showing their full hand up front and sort of limiting it to only showing what's what's needed. Like if they obviously throw out a situation where they show everything that they've got happening, it's like most of these companies. They're always trying to have a situation where some of these companies are strategically leaking products deliberately to obviously build up conversation around a product. But some companies are pretty close guarded to try and obviously keep that you look at the PlayStation, for example, the way that it looked. A lot of people had the dev kits as sort of the design that they were working on as a basis, but it looks nothing like the dev kit. Like the dev kit versus the actual thing, completely different product. So it's going to be an interesting situation as to how that works out moving forward, because I don't think that AMD have sort of got their sort of idea of to where they're aiming, and of course Nvidia's got their idea. And I know that AMD has pretty much basically come out and said that there was internal leaks there that they were calling it the Nvidia killer. They reckon somewhere between 40 to 50% higher than the 2080 Ti is what the aim was for essentially the performance. But that comes down to obviously how much power that card's going to obviously draw. And I know that Nvidia are also looking at pretty high power draw on their high-end cards as well. I think that's one of the reasons for their new custom 12-pin connection that was also leaked last week, the week before. That 12-pin connector was built specifically, I think, for their Founders Edition cards, so that it looked, maybe because of the actual design of the card itself and being such a weird dual fan design with one fan on the essentially top and one on the bottom of the card, and the weird PCB design layout. But I think also it was a combination of that and the fact that they don't want obviously 3 8-pins going to a graphics card, because that'll look a little bad potentially, and that's probably what it'll look. Probably not look as good. Yeah, I mean, as far as it goes, I don't think there's going to be any issues with 7nm capacity over at TSMC. I think as far as it goes, Intel already probably, if they were buying capacity, already have bought as much as they could get anyway. And I doubt that that's going to change.
Yes.
And I mean, they're only using it for their GPU. Their GPUs at this stage. Which, I mean, their whole GPU thing has sort of fizzled, not necessarily out, but it hasn't been as heavily emphasized as much of late, especially the dedicated GPU concepts that were coming through, and the whole push around the dedicated GPU cards. That's sort of not been heavily pushed in the tech media of late. So whether or not they've sort of rethought that whole process and they're going to just go down the path of low-powered integrated solutions only, it'll be an interesting situation. I know that their whole graphics card division is going to get a bit of a shake-up. And there's some even products that have been actually removed completely off roadmaps at this stage. So that's going to, whether or not they go in a different direction or, interesting concept.
Did you guys watch the Gamers Nexus MSI video?
I did watch that. And I mean, as far as it goes, I can definitely see where they're coming from in that regard. Like, that's the last thing you want to have is basically bribing or buying off the media. And especially when it's a situation where it's so easy now for people to get alternate, with this sort of whole tech situation. It's not like you have to rely on a single company to supply, product for review.
No.
I mean, there's alternates now out there. There's ways around it, sort of thing. And especially because a lot of the tech community sort of bands together a bit. Like, I mean, especially the tech media. Like, if one, tech source, for example, gets blacklisted, I mean, they'll just get one of their other friends in the whole media space to provide them with, a sample, and they can do their testing in that regard. They don't have to necessarily wait for a sample to come on their doorstep. And I mean, it's not like that hasn't happened in the past. I mean, I'm one of those people where, I would definitely not take a bribe or a payout in relation to getting a sample product or money in exchange for a review.
No.
I mean, at the end of the day, you know, the thing is you need a public that trusts the information that we, you know, provide to them. I personally wouldn't, you know, sacrifice my integrity for
Oh, no boost.
for a few
You did
short
block
term gain, and ruin my reputation, especially if it got found out. Like that's the thing. Like you've got to take in consideration if one of these tech channels got found out that they were taking that would be the end of their channel. You know, I mean, that would pretty much put them at the point where people would unsubscribe.
Wouldn't it be? It'd be illegal, wouldn't it? If you're taking money.
Not necessarily. I mean, it depends on how you look at it. Because,
Like
I mean, the
in
way
one
that it was
example
worded in MSI's article was that, we'll pay you for your time.
Yeah, but like in my eyes, that'd be in a way a sponsorship. So you'd have to declare it a sponsored video.
No, because they don't release the video, and then MSI would pay them for the time of making the video, but not release
Yeah.
it.
It's not technically a sponsorship. It's more just a hush money.
Okay.
More so than anything else. And it's like, oh, well, you went to the effort of doing the review. We'll pay you for your time, but don't put the review out. We'll just pay you for all the effort you've done, and make it so that, you know, you're not, you know, out of pocket, so to speak. But don't post the review, because this is the thing. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, that review is that person's revenue stream. Like that's how they make money. Is that, you know, that video itself may only get a few likes, but the sponsor spots and all that sort of stuff that also pertain to that video, you know, that adds to their content, that adds to their obviously revenue streams to be able to afford to do the whole review process, which we will be hopefully starting soon, doing some reviews and product segments, builds and stuff, hopefully in the not too distant future, to build out our video catalog with some more content. It's a slow process, especially when you have to work pretty much every day. And then do this on your day off. Well, it's not my day off this weekend, but...
What, you work today?
Huh?
Did you work today?
Yeah, 10 till 2.
Yeah, I was wrong, and then I was right, and then I was wrong again.
Would the Lego game be downloaded yet?
I don't know.
Or is it not downloaded whilst you're playing the game?
It is. We have 18 minutes. So not for a while yet.
So we've got a couple of products here that we've been teased with, and this is on PC World's website. So the first thing is that the new absolute gigantic 8TB Cuvo SSD from Samsung, which looks pretty slick. It's the new 870 series in the Cuvo.
Oh, it's not even a Exa Drive 100 terabyte.
Disgusting.
Not even
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's still only got a $900 price tag and not a $45,000 price tag.
Go big or go home, man.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, as far as it goes, I mean, the Samsung SSDs have been always pretty reliable.
Is it going to have a DRAM cache on this top?
No, because it's a QLC Cuvo series drive. It'll be most likely SLC caching. It'll be interesting to see how much they actually utilize, though, in SLC cache. Because, I mean, their current Cuvo series drives are 42 gigabytes of single layer cell NAND flash caching, SLC caching. So, for the most part, unless you're prepared to transfer 42.5 gigabytes of data in one fell swoop, you're not going to notice the actual issue of the drive slowing down to that point. It's going to be a situation where the SLC cache will obviously hold up pretty well for the most part, for most average users. I mean, the tech community and the more overclocking gaming community would obviously look into it, and obviously may have to make a situation. But I mean, I'm looking at it more as just a Steam library game. Now that my current SSD in my laptop's now almost full, thanks to Bilius over there.
Not me. don't
Yeah,
play video games.
filling my SSD pretty much to the brim, and this laptop having a 2.5-inch bay as well as the two M.2s, I can easily slot in an 8 terabyte Cubo.
I want to see a 980 with a Gen 4 with 4 terabytes on it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be buying one of those.
Those will be probably coming out soon, but I don't think they're actually readily available on the market yet.
Oh no, they don't even exist yet, as far as I know.
Yeah, the 980, the 980 series exists. It's just
As
again
a
supply.
Gen 4.
Yeah, PCI Express Gen
I
4 and the
didn't even know
980.
that existed.
Yeah, neither. Oh, what?
They just haven't obviously come out to the market yet. And then of course we've also got Asus's mini PC now supporting the Ryzen 4000 desktop APUs.
Is that the 4th gen? So the 4700Gs?
4300U up to the beefier 4800U in a NUC style box
Oh, that's pretty cool.
with an 8K 60Hz display supported.
What?
8K 60 Hz.
That's impressive.
USB
sounds
3.2
explicit.
Gen 2 Type C port, Wi-Fi 6, and up to 3200 megahertz DDR4 memory.
Wait, are we blue or red?
Red.
Oh.
No, blue. Wait, what?
What?
Um,
yeah,
no,
I'm
blue.
confused. We're blue?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's basically undercutting Intel's current lineup of their NUC. The only downside with this, obviously, is no Thunderbolt support. But I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense for a lot of people in that whole Thunderbolt camp if you're looking at the i3 and to most cases even the i5 model NUC, because I mean those CPUs are pretty weak in terms of performance. Pairing that with obviously the eGPU, I mean, who's going to pair an i3 with an eGPU that costs more than the NUC itself? It doesn't really work out. You know, I mean, the NUC's, you know, complete kit, you know, $600-700, and you're going to buy an eGPU box for $580 odd, and then put a GPU inside of it here in Australia. It's not going to be very economical, that's for sure.
No.
And like the fact that these are using obviously the next generation Vega integrated GPUs in the actual unit itself.
Vega's a fucking almost as old as Skylake now.
Well, the GPU in my laptop, I mean, is basically the same sort of unit. I mean, that's a pretty solid performer. I mean, even with the fact that it is essentially a 45 watt part, I could turn the dedicated GPU off on the machine here and actually even still play a few lighter games on that integrated graphics quite effectively. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out, especially if they obviously bump up the TDP limit on these chips with a slightly better cooling solution. Because with obviously most of these U-series parts, they can TDP up or down clock them to fit into different product categories. Pretty much the same that Intel do also with their products. That's why if you go into their overclocking tweaking utility for Intel, you can push the essentially power limits on some of those chips up a little bit higher, but at the sacrifice of generally heat and noise. I mean, I've been really happy with the A15 gaming laptop that I've got here in front of me. It's been a pretty solid unit. And then moving on, you falling asleep there, Bilius?
No, I'm just shaking my head at this game.
Yeah, I think because one of my mates I've been playing with one of my mates on it, and he's a professional player. So
And then, of course, the last tech topic for the week.
Which one was it?
US banning TikTok.
Yay! That'll be the biggest meme.
Well, I mean, as far as it goes, I mean, this was on the cards. I mean, after the whole Huawei, you know, obviously that whole debacle there, the biggest thing is that, I mean, this is basically handing essentially the Chinese government to some extent your essential facial features basically in an AI algorithm. They can pick you out of a crowd of thousands basically just by running it through some sort of camera AI analysis. So I mean, this is where that whole, you know, sort of, I think the issue is with national security, that they're worried about that from a US standpoint.
Oh my god, did we both just bumped?
The fact that
Yes.
you know, and I mean, it's one of those situations where it doesn't even have to be you itself. Like the thing is that you've got to understand that, like with these programs, they could
with that you itself.
they could also probably start pulling out traits
by robot
from family lines. So it might not even have to be you personally. It could be someone related to you or brother, sister, and of course they train the algorithm. It'd still potentially pick you out of a lineup.
I reckon it's gonna be like the movie, you know, it's the movie Us, that horror movie, where it's like the whole like exact copy of people underground. China's just gonna have an exact copy of the Western world, and then like that underground basement somewhere.
Well, that's it. I mean, this is the thing. Like, I mean, there's nothing to stop them from obviously, utilizing this technology.
Apart from the shitty CPUs that they want to use.
Well, yeah, I mean, as far as it goes, that there are obviously technology, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's one of those situations where the way that China is set up with their very heavily censored,
Life.
and their camera technology that they've got, everyone's under constant surveillance, and I mean, they use essentially that whole constant surveillance situation to basically reward and punish their population. You jaywalk, you actually lose essentially points on a social hierarchy. Like that's how restrictive that they actually are. If you don't follow their line, and of course this is again communist